Okay, welcome back. We have with us Patrick Lodge Otieno Lumumba. That's 61 year old. Born July 17, 1962. He is the director of the Kenya School of Law. Earned his LLB and LLM degrees at the University of Nairobi.
It's okay. I left being the director of the Kenya.
Okay. So that means there is an update. I am coming to you right there. Just trying to introduce. So there is an update right there. But he got his PhD in laws from C of the University of Ghent in Belgium, and his thesis was entitled the exclusive economic zone, the use of delimitation of economic zones. He also did his LLM thesis titled National Security and Fundamental Rights. So he's a man who cuts across. He's an orator, an outspoken one, heavily followed across the world, especially the African continent. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad to have this conversation with you. But in order to ensure that I'm not accused of misrepresentation, I was the director of Kenya School of Law, but that was 4 years ago. I served my term, and somebody is now serving. It's important to point out that current reality.
That is perfect. How is life? You are a busy man. You are all across. You are invited to speak at different places. You are involved in different things. How is life with you?
Life is a struggle. Life is about one's contribution, and what we are doing as we travel across Africa and the world is to reawaken the African spirit, to give practical meaning to Pan-Africanism, standing as we are on the shoulders of those who preceded us. And what one does when one has the opportunity or create the opportunity is to make one's contribution. That is what I am doing, making my contribution in the knowledge and in the hope that our little contributions put together will create a tsunami which will bring about positive change in the continent of Africa to our sons and daughters within the continent and in the diaspora.
You have this gift for gap and oration and logic and wisdom. What is the motivation? Where is it from?
When one speaks the language of the heart through the lips, one does what is good and right to the extent that is possible. So I speak from my heart. I speak from conviction. I speak from the thing that I know, and I try to speak about things that are practical with what I consider to be a honest view and honest intention. I don't succeed all the times, but I succeed most of the time.
Well, you have been a guest of the International Association of Judges, having some programs in Liberia to come and speak. I followed your speech online today talking about different issues of justice and the judicial systems across the continent and all of that. What is key in terms of the delivery of justice, the rule of law, the implementation of the rule of law across African countries? What is more important?
You know, justice is an avenue along which all of us walk. And the signposts are the laws which we are supposed to observe. The judges are the custodians. And the conversation that we have had here in Monrovia with judges from 14 African countries is to discuss the value of integrity. Integrity to ensure that the men and women who have the honor and privilege of serving as judges dispense justice in accordance with law from a standpoint of integrity. And we have asserted that integrity is something that must ensure that one does that which is good and right because it is good to do so. And it requires men and women who are fearless. It requires men and women who are patriotic. It requires men and women who are knowledgeable. It requires men and women who are warriors for justice, because justice is what guarantees that people live in a society, their station in life notwithstanding.
Yeah, and you were talking also about the contextualization of the dispensation of justice in terms of local context. And
Yes.
yeah, you want to advance on that. Why is that important?
You know, if you don't contextualize the administration of justice, then you are a stranger. You come to Liberia and there are certain things that Liberia and even different Liberian communities want to be done. If you are administering justice relating to land, and you go to the land of the Mandinka or the Malinke or to the Kisi peoples, and you are not sensitive to the realities, then what you consider to be justice will be resisted. If you go to a society and you don't consider their tradition, and you don't consider how they do things, then your brand of justice will invariably be discarded and you'll create discord into the community. We live in a world today where there is what I call cultural imperialism. And this cultural imperialism is coming, as it has always done, from particularly Europe and America. And we also see elements of it from China and different parts of the world. It is therefore important that those who are administering justice in various African countries are sensitive to the realities. We have a saying in Kiswahili that he or she who abandons culture is a slave. And therefore, if you want to be true to yourself, if you want to enjoy your freedom to the fullest, you've got to understand the environment in which you operate. You've got to be agile. As a student of martial arts, I always remember this.
Yeah, you're also a student of martial arts. Okay, I see why you look fit. Even at 61 years, you look quite younger.
Oh, yeah. Bruce Lee used to say that if you want to be a good martial artist, you must be like water. Water can be liquid. Water can be it can be a gas. Water can also be solid. And in its liquid form, it occupies and takes the shape of whatever it occupies without changing its quality and character. And that is what we need to adopt and adapt in order to be relevant. Remember also that Africa does not exist in isolation. We exist as a part of the world, but even in that, we must never lose our character. You can make a forest, but each tree has its distinctive and distinct quality.
But then people could argue that justice is like air. It is cosmic. The tenets of justice, the moral laws are supposed to be cosmic. Yeah. They are supposed to apply to all, no matter where a person is.
That is what I call sophistry. People can argue about anything. But we know that what is justice, the justice of the slave owner is not the justice of the slave. The justice of those who operated camps in Nazi Germany was not the same justice that was perceived by those whom they were victimizing. The justice of the architects of apartheid was not the justice that can be described as universal. So there are certain elements that you can say to be universal. Take, for example, in 1948, when the international community, in the absence of Africa, says that certain rights are universal. Were Africans present during that time? No, they were not. When the colonial administration said that Africans were less than human beings, was that justice? So it is right to say that there are certain things that can now be considered to be of a universal character, but justice must also be contextual. Decontextualized justice is injustice. And that is one of the things that we must accept. Will we have a unanimous position? No. Unanimity only exists in the graveyard. When you have human beings, even when you talk about things that appear to be obvious, they'll be debated. But ultimately, even in the midst of debate, there is what must emerge as the acceptable standard from which, if you deviate, then society punishes you.
And that would drive me to the issue of war and economic crimes. For example, our country fought years of civil war. and there has been this push for the establishment of a war on economic crimes, court to punish those who bear the greatest responsibilities for the war. Recently, our president signed the executive order for the establishment of an office that will go after the processes of implementing this war on economic crimes, praised by the Americans and the Europeans as being a good path for our country. What do you think?
Let me tell you, history has demonstrated not once, not twice, but times without number, that if crimes are not punished, they'll be repeated again. Impunity is the mother's milk of terror, and it is therefore always important that if a society goes through a process where certain individuals or groups of individuals have perpetrated certain crimes, they ought to be taken through a process to determine their culpability. Will it always be right? Not always. That is why there must be a mix. Those who know have always said that in order to ensure that there is sustainable peace, those who bear the greatest responsibility must be punished, but it is also important that memories are selective so that you reconcile society. And I will give you a recent example. After the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, the international community created the International Tribunal for Rwanda. Those who committed the most egregious of the crimes were punished. But the Rwandese administration post-genocide, in their wisdom, then went back into their tradition, into the Gacaca courts. And they said, in order to reconcile society, we are going to allow the perpetrators to come forth and repent, then we'll forgive them. That happened, and the society is going through a process of reconciliation. In South Africa, after apartheid, the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission was also put together for purposes of healing the society. In Mozambique, during the administration of President Samora Moises Machel, those who had collaborated with the Portuguese were named and shamed. Then they were rehabilitated. My point is, we must never allow impunity to bestride our societies, because if that happens, then society will be visited by the same pain again. But if people are tried and those who are culpable are found guilty and punished or forgiven, it doesn't mean that those who are found to be culpable will be punished, but at least it will give the society an opportunity to reconcile.
Let us get that point. Yes. Punished or forgiven. Yes. So it becomes a responsibility of the society whether they want to forgive them or to punish them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, because we have a whole lot to talk about.
Yes.
So, thankfully, you also headed the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission at one point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Corruption, you've always spoken against it. It ties in with the issues of poverty that becloud the continent. Countries are so rich, like for example, our country, rich in a whole lot of resources, with a highly younger population and all of that. But we are still poor. We sit among and over riches and resources, but we are still poor. What is happening here?
You know, the conundrum of poverty in Africa is an oxymoron, and I'm using this very deliberately. We are possibly one of the richest continents on earth with the poorest people on earth. And even if you look at the individual countries, look at the resources, the rubber, the ore, the uranium, the gold, the diamond, our soils which are fertile. One person once said that poverty is a choice which African politicians have chosen because it is in their best interest to keep their populations poor so that they can manipulate them. And I hold the view that African countries are number one poor because the quality of leadership that we consistently give ourselves are not in the business of trying to resolve the problems that chain our people. It is also true that there are external players who, because of our disorganization and the greed of our politicians, continue to manipulate us, with the consequence that our country's resources are still exported in their raw form to those countries. And thirdly, we ourselves, we the population, are also complicit, because when we are given an opportunity to elect good men and women, invariably in Africa, 9 out of 10 times, we choose, as I've said before, we choose hyenas to take care of our goats, and when the goats begin to die, we begin to wonder what is happening. So it's a combination of factors. It is now the duty of younger Africans to make demands. That is what has happened throughout history. It happened in Europe during the French Revolution. It happened in China. It happened in South Korea. We must be consistent in making demands and also participating to ensure that we change the circumstances of our countries by rolling up our sleeves and doing that which is good and right for the benefit of this generation and generations yet to be born.
Let me take you to point one about the quality of leadership and making mistakes. The population will argue that we may not know the intentions of people. Politicians will present themselves as having the best plans and the saviors and here and there, and we elect them and they mess up. So how can the population know who the best leaders are that will actually move the country forward?
You know, it allows me to answer a question that you posed about corruption in the first place. Most African politicians engage in corruption, and that is one of the factors that undermines our well-being. We people now go into politics in Africa because it is the shortest avenue to acquiring material wealth. But coming to the question that you posed about knowing the intentions of individuals, you know, I've always said that leaders do not become bad. Power does not make people bad. Power reveals who people truly are. And if you care to examine people correctly, you are able to identify who is not and should not be a politician to serve you. So this idea that we were misguided, this idea that we were confused is, in my view, largely without merit. If a politician comes and tells you, I'm going to give you money in order to vote, if a politician comes and tells you, vote me because I'm your tribe, if a politician comes and tells you, vote me because I'm from your religion, that leader, that politician is without merit. Julius Nyerere of Tanzania used to say that any politician who is bankrupt of ideas will always appeal to religion or appeal to emotions and tribe and use bribery. But any politician who wants to serve their country will present an agenda and will not overpromise. Okay. Because when they overpromise, they cannot deliver, because they must be modest in what they are capable of achieving. So even as we accuse these individuals, we who are the voters, and I do not know, but I think it is Corazon Cojuangco Aquino of Philippines, at one time the president said that what is called democracy, where the voters do not know why they are voting, is nothing but a confederacy and a conspiracy of fools.
Wow, quite powerful, and it almost reminds of the earlier topic I was talking about, over-promising what you can do in a particular time frame. In the second point, you also mentioned outsiders manipulating our leaders and politicians. Who are these outsiders? And when you talk about exporting raw materials to their countries, why is that a problem? Why is it wrong?
You know, there is a sense in which there are different types of outsiders. There are those who have what I call the political, geopolitical interests. These are the big powers. You'll find powers from Western Europe, from the United States of America, from Russia, from China. Lately we see even the Emiratis, the Turks. And that is the law. The reality of the world is that it is the law of the jungle. Survival of the fittest and the dying of the least suitable. And if you are not organized, and most African countries are disorganized, we operate in silos, and therefore we are easy to manipulate. And if you allow yourself to be manipulated, the European Union will manipulate you, the Americans will manipulate you, the Turks will manipulate you, the Chinese will manipulate you, Russia will manipulate you, the Japanese will manipulate you, because you are weak. And every country does what is in their best interest. When you hear some of us say that the safety for Africa not only requires but demands that we work as a united force, we mean that that is the only way in which we are going to ensure that the neo-colonial project does not succeed. Because as Kwame Nkrumah said many years ago, the colonialist does not change his DNA. He simply wears a different mask. He comes, once he had ceased to be the colonialist, he now comes as an investor. And they have appetite for things. They have appetite for iron ore. They don't want you to add value. They have appetite for rubber. They don't want you to make tires and to make gloves. And it is our duty to realize what our self-interest is. That is what Africa does not do as often as it should. I now know that there are attempts at doing that. It started the Lagos Plan of Action in 1980. It is now encapsulated in Africa Agenda 2063 and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But Africa is quick to make declarations. Africa is quick to make protocols. Africa is quick to promise what our leaders don't lead us in the direction of delivery. And I am saying that the time is now. Because if we are not careful, if we continue on this trajectory of being weak and therefore susceptible to manipulation, Africa will be recolonized. And this time round, they'll not recolonize you by having presidents who are white or yellow. What they'll do is to control your economy. Because once they control your economy, as the saying goes, he or she who pays the piper calls the tune. So you'll sit in this radio station and the person who pays will tell you, I don't like that broadcast. Shut it down. And that is what they tell countries. They ring your president and say, Mr. Man, we don't like the direction that you are going. We don't care that is in the best interest of your citizen. We don't care about your citizens. We care about ourselves and by extension our citizens. Africa must liberate ourselves and be on the trajectory of economic flight. Because when you are strong, your voice is listened to.
Now, on the issues of resources and how they could work for the African people, I'm using our own countries in Syria, because we have a whole lot of resources. A 5+ million population, 63,000 square miles, not so big, not a huge population. We should be some of the richest people anywhere on the planet, isn't it?
Yes.
So what could happen? What are certain policies, officials, private sector, people could employ to ensure that these resources now are benefiting the owners of the land?
Let me give you a clear example. Liberia is about 111,000 square kilometers, a population, say, of 5 million. Let's look at a single sector in energy. Liberia does not generate more than 1,000 megawatts of electricity.
Not more than 88.
Yeah. And let's look at another country in Europe, Denmark, which has a size of about 43,000 square kilometers, a population just about the same, generates 35,000 megawatts of electricity, more than all of sub-Saharan countries combined, excluding South Africa. What did they do that we must now do? Number one, ensure that you have policies that enable private sector. Ensure that you have a government that is controlling and facilitating private sector so that your laws require of investors that even as they earn profit, it is replowed back. Number two, ensure that you have energy that will allow for industrialization. If it is in agriculture, ensure that you do not export primary goods to the extent that is possible, you value add. And if you do that in the next 10 years, you'll see that the circumstances of your country begin to improve. It is easier said than done, but we have seen in our lifetime countries which had resources, using those resources in a dramatic way. Look at Qatar. What does Qatar have? Gas. And how have they leveraged on gas to ensure that there is value addition, and therefore they have improved the quality of their people. They import high quality labor. Look at Dubai, which is one of the Emiratis. It doesn't produce oil. People think that Dubai as an emirate has oil. It's the Abu Dhabis have oil. Look at Bahrain. Look at Oman. It can be done within the continent of Africa. Look at what Mauritius is doing. Look at what Botswana is doing. And I hold the view that a country like Liberia, with resources which is bordering the Atlantic Ocean, if you have the right policies and the politicians are committed, the population is invariably ready to follow people who are doing the right thing. Because what does an average Liberian want? Good quality of life. How do you guarantee good quality of life? By improving the people's income. How do you improve the people's income? Is in order to add value to your resources and make people be in an environment where they can invest, because government can only employ so many. Look at Liberia. I went to the United States several years ago in Minnesota and in places like Philadelphia, and you find Liberians in the diaspora. If they are allowed and permitted and an enabling environment is created, they can come here by using their resources. And let me tell you, this Liberia can grow into an economy that will be respected, where people's quality of life is high. It can be done in the next 10 years. Only thing that must be done is that there must be deliberate action on the part of politicians. Will there be difficulties? Yes, there will be difficulties. Will there be headwinds? Yes, there will be headwinds. But I hold the view that history has demonstrated that even in the face of those headwinds, it can be done. Let me conclude answering that question with a single example. 1975. The only thing that we heard about Vietnam was the war and the American presence. Today, Vietnam is in the textile sector. It is in the paper sector. They are going to surpass many African countries in the production of coffee, and they are adding value to coffee. I look forward to the day when there will be an iron ore factory here in Liberia. I look forward to the day when rubber will no longer be exported from Liberia, when Firestone will ensure that her presence here is beneficial to the people of Liberia. It can be done, it must be done, because if it is not done, we'll continue to be beggars until the second coming of Jesus Christ.
His name is Dr. Professor PLO Lumumba. This is the OK Conversation on OKFM 99.5. He's taking some time out with us. Now, how then can these African countries, it is a two-pronged question. One, how can Africans work among themselves as African countries to beef up their own economies like the European Union did? That's one. Two, how can each country try to navigate within the international system of things and maintain its ability to develop itself, knowing that there are these powerful countries that are always breathing down our necks?
You know, one of the things that Africa must do is to stop operating in silos. And that is why I love the very early, some say even romantic call about Pan-Africanism in 1963. But we then have now recognized that if we don't want to have what I call the Big Bang African unity, at least we can start regionally. Look at ECOWAS. If within ECOWAS we identify the strengths of Liberia, Sierra Leone, Mauritania, Senegal, Nigeria, and Ghana, and all the countries of ECOWAS, we can then agree that each country becomes the home of the materials in which she is strongest. Once we have done that, we identify our weakness. We say we have energy. We need energy. Can La Côte d'Ivoire produce energy? Can Nigeria produce energy? Then we solve that problem. Does Nigeria have oil, or Ghana has oil, or Gabon has oil on those countries? And do we need a single currency? Yes, we do need a single currency. Once we identify all those, and my brother, all those things were identified, Under the Lagos Plan of Action in 1908, it was identified there must be enhanced intra-African trade. We start with ECOWAS, and you go to the Maghreb, do Maghreb. You go to Central Africa, you do Central Africa. You go to East Africa, do East Africa. You go to the Horn, do the Horn. You go to SADC, do the SADC. And within that, you then aim to be continental. And one of the things that you want to do is to remove the visa regime. How can it be that when I travel from Nairobi, Kenya, I require a visa in Liberia? I shouldn't have it. Because a European today is capable of traveling from Bratislava in Slovakia through to the Canary Islands or through to Lisbon in Portugal without a visa. And they are using 27 countries or thereabouts are using a single currency called the euro. But here you come to Liberia, the dollar. You go to the next.
We have two kinds of dollars.
You go to the Liberian dollar.
Yeah.
Then you go to the Lassi. Then once you do that, then you are weak and you cannot facilitate. So you look to the United States of America as your Mecca and as your true north, and therefore you don't care about the continent of Africa. I believe that these things can be done, and they can only be done if we collaborate. If, for example, the European Union wants to negotiate with Liberia, they should be told, no, we are going to negotiate with you in the context of ECOWAS or in the context of the African Union with the Liberian issues being discussed in that context. But today, you hear China coming here, we are negotiating with the Liberia. Every country with Liberia. Then at one point, we are negotiating with ECOWAS. Then we are negotiating with the African Union. The more confused we are, the safer they are. And they love it that way. Then they invite you to their countries and they offer you 21 gun salutes, or they allow you to do a few things and you think you are equal. If the economy, the GDP of Liberia is smaller than the GDP of Shanghai.
Yeah, by far.
By far. So Liberia is safer within ECOWAS. Liberia is safer within the African Union. And that is true of Sierra Leone, it's true of Mali, it's true of Benin, it's true of Gabon. That is the gospel that we must preach across the continent of Africa. That is the gospel that Nkrumah preached. That is the gospel that Sekou Touré preached. That is the gospel that must remain alive. That is the gospel that we are now, and hope that President Boakai will begin to preach. Because if he begins to preach it, then his foot soldiers will understand one thing, that the Liberia we want to build is a Liberia whose sons and daughters will be proud of. A Liberia, when I was in school, I used to hear that Liberia had one of the largest populations of ships sailing the seas with her flags. That is a source of income.
It still does.
And it should monetize it. I want to hear that Liberia earns $2 billion out of that. It can't be done. Panama does that. I want to hear that. I want to hear that Liberia attracts 20 million tourists, not 500,000. It can't be done. I want to hear that Liberia, this old country created in the 19th century by men of color, that this country is united and moving in the right direction. It can't be done. I want to hear that Liberia is the home of those who want to come back to the continent. I want to hear that people are investing here from the diaspora, 230 million of them. If Liberia only gets 50 million of them putting their money here, you imagine what Liberia would be. I want to hear that the 15 counties of Liberia has an anchor project which is generating jobs and producing money. It can't be done. And I want to hear that Nigeria has ambassadors drawn from African countries who are saying the place to go to is Monrovia in Liberia, and there'll be a flag standing and calling Africans, come and invest with us for the sake of the continent. It can't be done. It must be done.
It certainly can be done. Africa is one of the youngest in terms of population age. There's a terrible story of loss of young Africans dying at sea, crossing over to Europe, and all that kind of thing. What should leaders focus on? So that if their people are traveling out, it is because they want to learn, it's because they want opportunities that they can go the right way and still be beneficial to their own countries. But besides, how can the conditions back home improve so that young people can experience the development of their full potentials and don't necessarily have to take risky ventures?
You know, my brother, there was a time I saw and listened to an interview of a young lady drawn from an African country. She had been in Libya for 1 year. And she was asked, after being rescued from the Mediterranean Sea, "Are you not going back home?" She said, "I will never go back home. I prefer to die in the Mediterranean Sea." That is not a normal instinct. And any leader of any country that watches that and does not get pained or touched is an animal. And it has pained me many times that when people are dying in the Mediterranean Sea or off the Atlantic coast, it is the European leaders who convene meetings. I've never seen in the recent past African leaders meeting in Addis Ababa and saying, "There is a crisis, our young men and women are running away. What are they running away from?" The time has come, and you are so right in saying, nobody is saying that young Africans should not look for opportunities outside. They should. But from a standpoint of dignity and seeking to acquire better information or to serve their desires in those countries. But those who are running away from their countries and dying in the Sahara Desert and in the seas are desperate. What must we do beyond complaining? Make the conditions at home conditions that give people hope. Many young people graduate from high school, from university as engineers, sometimes doctors and other professionals. When they are in their home, they see no hope. There is no promise. They see the politicians have literally captured their country and held it on a choke. It is struggling to survive. They look at the environment is poisonous. Then they say, "I'm going to the United States of America to flip hamburger. I'm going to Saudi Arabia to be an au pair," because it is all about survival. Yet, the environment at home is pregnant with opportunities, and our politicians are killing the babies and causing stillbirths. Have you ever wondered that Africa is the richest continent on earth and our people are the poorest? And paradoxically, our politicians are some of the richest in the world relative to our GDPs. Selfish individuals. But young Africans must also remain at home, some of them, and make demands of the politician. History has demonstrated that if you make demands, you can drive them out of home and make changes. We have seen it. Some may not like what is happening in the Sahel, in Burkina, or in Mali, or in Niger, or in Guinea-Conakry, but those young soldiers, what they are saying, we have waited for too long. We have seen the vote being manipulated for too long. We have seen the political class abuse us for too long. We are now using the position that we have and the weapon that we have to scare them so that they can allow us to rebuild the country. My only prayer and hope is that those young men will allow themselves to be taught, and they will be in office only as long as is necessary to midwife a new, more participatory process.
Well, one could say that you are supportive of military takeovers.
I understand why that happens. When you corner a people and they have no opportunity, their sons and daughters will use extraordinary means. And I remember these words of Kwame Nkrumah in 1957. I think, I may be wrong about the year, but this is what he said. It is the duty of men and women in uniform to be subservient to civilian authority. But if it becomes absolutely necessary and in their wisdom they choose to overthrow the constitution in order to restore order, it may be painful, even disgusting. But they must be reminded that that intervention must only be for a short time for the purpose of restoring order. So when we say we understand, it does not mean we support. It simply means that we appreciate the circumstances that allow that to happen. And that in itself sometimes is necessary, because we have seen elections, African politicians, some of them have mastered the art of manipulating electoral processes so that you vote. As Anastasio Somoza once said in Nicaragua, when he had lost the election and he told those who had lost or been declared the loser, he told them, "We know you won the vote, but we won the count." That is the situation in which, and the circumstances in which we are beginning to understand. When a cat is cornered, the cat will come back fighting.
It is often said that no country can develop beyond the capacity of its educational system, the mentality of its people, and all of that. I want you to talk a bit about the educational systems we have on the continent. What can happen to make it relevant for the growth and development we desire?
Every African country has a duty to examine and re-examine their curriculum. Liberia is unique in the manner in which it came about. Freed slaves came here to join their brothers and sisters who are already here and created what we now know as Liberia. But many African countries suffered the injustice of colonization and the injustice of partition at Berlin, and then became the subject of European colonizers. And during the entire period when the European colonizers were present in this continent, the education system that they created was meant to serve France, was meant to serve the United Kingdom, meant to serve Germany when they were still colonizers, meant to serve Belgium, meant to serve Italy, meant to serve Spain, meant to serve Portugal. When we regained independence, many African countries did not revamp their education system. They continued with them, they tinkered with them a little. That is why we still have countries, we are producing engineers, but when we want to build our roads, who do we ask to build our roads? It's the Europeans and the Chinese. That is why we have all these qualifications. We have our doctors. When politicians are sick, they go to Arabia or go to the United States of America or to Europe, because we don't have faith in our education system. Are there countries that I can talk about which, after regaining their independence or regaining control of their affairs, have re-examined their education system? Yes. Some will argue Korea was not occupied for a very long time, but look at the manner in which the Koreas after the war, particularly South Korea, have ensured that they are in the technological space. Look at even Vietnam, which is now getting into that space. Look at Brazil in the recent past. Look at China, after they were devastated by the British during the Opium War, and within the last 30 years, see what they have done. Look at Turkey, when Atatürk became a power. Look at what is happening in those countries. And what I'm therefore saying, that it is incumbent upon African countries to re-examine their curriculum in order to produce young men and women who are going to be able to participate in this technology age. If you are talking about internet, you are talking about artificial intelligence. Do you think that the men and women, the young men and women who are being taught in our schools are going to be able to compete with those who are making drones? Are they going to be able to compete with those who are in making elevators, those who are involved in artificial intelligence? Or we still just have examination passing machines who are able to tell us which part of a locust is different from the part of a cockroach? Not that that is not important, it is, but will it catapult us into the orbit of the information age so that we can earn the dividends of the 4th Industrial Revolution and the 5th Industrial Revolution? These are the things that we must ask ourselves. And it can be done initially, regionally, WAEC in West Africa, East African communities, SADC. And once that is done, then we can be able to compete. If you look at any African country now, including here in Liberia, look at the young men and women who are coming from China. Within a short time, they are multimillionaires. Within a short time, they are building our roads. Within a short time, we trust them to do our buildings. Within a short time, they are importing technology from their country, and we trust them with repairing them. When we want to build ships, we can't build our own ships. We bring marine engineers. When we have mines, the best that our people can do is to go deep into the mines and then bring the ore. And who is refining the ore? Education is at the very heart of it. In fact, it is a cliche, but education is the key to industrialization. And if we don't give that key to our young men and women, others will come with both the locks and the keys, and we'll be participating, and all we'll be doing is praying and fasting in the hope that divinity will shower us with things.
Well, and he gave us brains and resources. I don't think he can physically come to do anything for us.
And he said, go ye and subdue the earth. And what have we allowed the earth to do to us? To subdue us.
Let us talk a bit about agriculture. Self-sufficiency in food production is also key to the survival of humanity. Health. So we want to tie health and agriculture together, how we can make them work for our societies.
If you can't feed yourself, your enemy will feed you, and he'll feed you poison. Look at most of Africa now. Look at the seeds that we have lost. If you go in many African households, we are now buying seeds either from American, European, and Chinese companies. We have lost all our seed, whether it's in maize, whether it's millet, whether it's cassava, whether it's rice. And the net effect is that we do not know what we are eating, genetically manipulated. And I'm not one to say that science should not be used to improve the quality of seeds. But I'm one to say that if you do not know how that is happening, then you are consuming that which you do not know. Today, Africa is a net importer of grains. We import wheat. We import rice. We import, if you go into poultry, we import chicken from Brazil. We import chicken feed from Brazil. We are importing tilapia from China, which means that the world is feeding us. And yet, if you look at our land, they are arable. If you go to a place like Zimbabwe, it has and can produce grain. If you go to South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, and we still depend on rain-fed agriculture. And what you eat determines your health condition. You look at the cancer that we now have very early on, setting in at age 20 and age 30. Do we know what we are eating? Do we know what the toxicity? Do we know the fertilizers that we are using? Where are they coming from? In other words, I can't agree with you more. That is the duty of Africa to feed ourselves. I'm very happy with the Ethiopians that after realizing that we over-relied on Ukraine for grain supply, they are now going into the arena of ensuring that they are sufficient in the production of wheat. I'm very happy with Ghana because they are beginning to improve production of rice. I'm also very happy with Nigeria in that regard. I'm equally happy with Kenya, which is trying to ensure that we have production of maize. Tanzania is also in that regard. Of course, Rwanda and Uganda. So efforts are being made, but I'm saying that we need to redouble our efforts because we must ensure that we have good agriculture. And I think there is a protocol. If you look at the 7 pillars of the Africa Agenda 2063, one of them is that we must be in a position to feed ourselves. And the Malabo Protocol does encourage Africa to ensure that we produce that which we will satisfy our needs. And linked with that, the Abuja Protocol on Health also requires that we invest in agriculture, we invest in health, and we also reinvest in research and development. One of the things that Africa does not do is to invest in research and development.
Yeah.
Africa must, and in my view, African countries should agree that every country will contribute no less than 1% of its annual budget. I'm not talking about GDP, just budget, to finance research institutions, whether it's the Malagasy Institute of Applied Science, whether it's the Louis Pasteur Institute in Senegal, whether it's Kenya Medical Research Institute or International Institute for Livestock. We must finance this. Europe and America is in research. India is in research. The Arab world is in research. Qatar is now hiring farms to cultivate crops in the continent of Africa. In a single sentence, Africa must feed herself. And Africa that feeds herself will control the quality of the food that is on her people's table. And when they do that, they'll be able to say that this is healthy, and we'll become a healthier, younger continent. And in the fullness of time, with the labor that is deliberately applied, Africa will liberate herself from the chains of sorrows and lamentations.
Before we go to the last, because we know you're a busy man, you have to go. I know you earlier met with the vice president. There is private advice given to leaders, and there can be public advice. What can you say to President Boakai, elected in 2023 by the Liberian people? And perhaps you could comment on our elections as well. But what could be your advice?
As you rightly said, I've had a conversation with the vice president, and a very healthy conversation in my view. Number one, I got the impression that he understands the situation in which the country finds herself. And he has what I call a learning spirit. And that is what you need, a learning spirit in order to assess the situation. And somebody like me and others like me who mean well for Liberia, occasionally to consult us, not that because we are experts, but because we wish Liberia well. We are able, without the advantage of expertise, to tell the politicians whom we want to succeed things that must be done. And one of the things is, number one, you've got to take care of the welfare of young people. You've got to take care of basic things such as agriculture. You've got to ensure that you improve production of energy. You've got to ensure that you give investors confidence so that even as they invest in the country, they can take away a portion of their profit, but that profit must be replowed here. And I believe that that is the kind of conversation that you need. And the administration of President Boakai comes at a time when Liberia, like a number of African countries, are suffering in a very major way. First of all, you inherit institutions that are almost crippled by corruption. You inherit countries which are almost bankrupt. You inherit countries which are over-reliant on donor aid. You inherit countries where there are no employment opportunities for young people. You inherit a country where you have impatient young people who can't wait. What do? Because the impatient people, and we discussed this with the vice president, and he agreed. I said, when you are in power, you only have honeymoon during the swearing in. After the swearing in, people want delivery the following day, even if they know it is not possible. But I believe that what must happen is that every country and every leader must identify at least 2 iconic life-changing projects, which he or she will say, we are going to do all these, but judge us on the basis of these 2 iconic projects, which will be life-changing. And you can choose them. You can simply say, like water for every household. Within 6 years, that is possible. Water. Then we are going to go into agriculture. We will feed ourselves. Because agriculture promises you 2 things. Feeding the people and also creating opportunities, jobs, and for people, agro-business. Once you do that, then you'll talk about industrialization. You'll talk about provision of power, because that is a long-term project. And you do that in the knowledge that within your short time in office, you cannot solve all problems. This is an intergenerational problem, is a marathon relay race. You hand over the baton from one generation of leaders to the other. And once you do that, you'll win the people's confidence. And once you have the people's confidence, they will be pushing, there'll be the tailwind that makes you progress. And you must also be honest with the people. Tell them, I promise you, but it's not going to be an easy ride. There'll be bumps, but together we will work and ensure that we land safely.
And fight corruption strongly.
Yes.
Before we go to the lines, were you holding your breath when we were going to elections in 2023? And afterward, did you breathe a sigh of relief?
Yes, indeed. Because, number one, I have a problem. Most African heads of state who are incumbents never want to leave office.
Mm-hmm.
And I was relieved when President Weah said, we lost these elections. Whatever other sins he may have committed, at least he did not commit the sin of wanting to stick to office when he knew that he had lost the election.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a good thing. And I must tell you that I travel across the continent of Africa, and that act is seen as having been a very positive act. So we are happy that you went through that particular bump without an incumbent saying, well,
I won.
I won. What can you do?
I won the count.
I won the count. You won the vote. He did not say that. So we are very happy that that has happened. And we wish the administration of President Boakai luck. And it's not just luck. We also say it is hard work. It is not easy. In fact, those who know always say, when you get into the office, that is when you begin to realize that it's not as easy as you thought it would be.
Yeah.
Because you now begin to see things which you could not see when you were outside of the house. And I believe that this is where the road meets the rubber.
Councillor Sema Sarenia Sifo says, let Prof. Lumumba draw us through some of the highs and lows of Liberia in the struggle for self-determination in Africa. Let him tell us the fond memories and what needs to be done to revive that great vision.
You know, when we read about Liberia, we always said, this country that was specially created. Then we heard about the difficulties between the indigents and the Americo-Liberians, and we were unhappy that how can one group of people be mistreating another group of people. Then there was the low point after the administration of Samuel Kanyando, and then there was the Civil War. That was one of the most painful things, and it was a pain which I think Liberia has yet to recover from. Because the pains of the Civil War, the animosity that was created, the suspicion that was created, and then there was the interim administration of, I think, of President Sawyer, that was. Then you midwifed, and I remember that the General Pandey from Kenya was one of the people who were here as the guarantors during the peacekeeping, and we know the opportunities that were lost in terms of the investment and regaining donor and investor confidence again. Then there was the administration of President Johnson Sirleaf, which we thought was a high. Then you didn't fly as high as we thought you would. Then when President Weah came, some of us thought, and at least I thought, that with the clout that he had, using football alone, I thought that he would persuade some of the footballers, multi-millionaires, to adopt each one of the 15 counties in Liberia to build industries. That did not happen. And when I hear and know now that even Liberian civil servants had not been paid for months, then it was a disappointment. And I hold the view that it could have been better during that administration. I now hope that the administration of President Boakai is going to ensure that those holes are sealed and will set Nigeria on a flight path. Liberia will set Liberia on a flight path so that Liberia can attain her position. You know, Liberia is iconic. It is iconic because it gave us an opportunity as persons of color to say that it can be done. And if Liberia succeeds, as I want her to succeed, it will be able to send a clear message from Monrovia that it can be done. President Bokai's administration now has that unique opportunity to make Liberia great again.
President Bokai's administration has the unique opportunity to make Liberia great again. The words of Prof. Dr. PLO Lumumba right here on the OK Conversation on OKFM 99.5. We'll take few calls. We have to let him go, but we'll take few calls on 0777-700-995. The international number has been pinned for those of you who are overseas to also make your contribution to the show. Let's see who's coming in from right here. Let's start from international. Welcome. What is your name and where are you calling from?
My name is Julius Jeh.
Where are you calling from?
Professor.
Where are you calling from?
From the state. Yeah, I'm calling from the state of Colorado.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Lumumba, thank you ever so much for all your kind words. Indeed, you are a good man. Now, I noted all of your intellectual thoughts align with that of the ELF leader, Julius Jeh.
I don't know what's happening. The line's a little bit terrible. Let's take Representative Muka Kamara of District 14, Monrovia County. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Judah. Let me say thank you to the Dan Prof from PLO Lumumba. Welcome to Liberia. I just want to know whether the Prof in the near future we have some interest in having time with us in Liberia to at least get at the University of Liberia to lecture us about the Pan-African activities in Africa, how to help Liberia to grow in the Pan-African.
So like you want him to spend some time here, like weeks, months?
like to come and month with us.
No, I'm coming.
On board with the Pan-African ideology,
okay,
so that we can follow him more as time go back.
No,
okay.
I will be coming hopefully in the month of July, and you know that we have now established the Pan-African Institute with the first institute at Kenya University in Nairobi. The next one will be at Eden University in Lusaka, and we look forward to establishing a relationship here in Liberia. So I can promise that we will try to spread the gospel, and I hope that you will be one of the individuals that will work with us.
Okay, thanks so kindly, sir. Welcome. Let's hear you. What's your name?
Good evening, Junior.
Yeah.
And good evening to the Professor Lumumba. I'm John B. Moba. I'm from Getty Street.
Go ahead.
Firstly, I want to say kudos and thank you for inviting the ever-present, the brain, one of Africa's finest brain into Liberia studio, one of Liberia's finest studio, so that at least we had the opportunity to listen to him. But I want to know, Chief, and I like the way you place it, like you said, President Bwaka had a better opportunity to change the narrative of Liberia, to put Liberia on a better trajectory based on the mutual understanding and the cooperative or cooperation that if Liberia is willing to cooperate with the president's demand or the president's statement or the president, therefore you will...
So what is your question? We don't have enough time.
Okay, my question, really, can you come and like the professor said, one of the reporters said, can you come and help us develop the Pan-African...
No, but he said it. He said he will be here in June. So let's take another person. Welcome. Let's hear you.
Thank you, my good friend and brother Julius. Let me say a big thank you to you for inviting the prop in there. Look, Mr. Jeh, you have made my day. You know, Mr. Lumumba is one of my mentors. Always time when you see me online, I let out Facebook, even though I can go on Facebook, but I'm always on YouTube. Pointing data just to listen to him. Because when you listen to that man, Julius, if you want to learn, you will learn. You will be forced to learn. Because he brings sense into people's head. It's just left for the individual that now want to pick it up. Look, and the fight that he's fighting for Africa, only God wants to know that he will keep him around for a long period of time. Because the message that he's passing around, preaching to us as the Africans, as the world at large, it left for us as the Africans to say, you know what, enough is enough. We need to take the bull by the horn. We need to stand up. We have suffered for long. They wasn't know what much you're doing for us. Like he referred for it. We are just puppets. The people can't use us. All the resources is in Africa. The people live for Africa. What we cannot do is everything they man preaching a message. But African leader, when they man is preaching a message, they take him to be an enemy. They even want to see him live long because they say he wants to take prayer for their mouth.
Okay.
Can you imagine?
Thanks. Okay, thanks. So kind of we'll hold that. Let's go international again. Let's see who's on this line. Welcome. Let's hear you. Okay. Okay, thanks. So currently we'll take orders. We have to run with time. Let me take the course and come back to you. Yeah, let's take the course quickly. Welcome. Let's hear you quickly.
Thank you, Julius. This is Blake, and let me say that foreign investment that comes to Africa had no intention to make African rich. I had this debate with few guys these few days, telling them that look, these guys come and they milk our resources, they leave our country deplorable, and they leave us in poverty. A key example, my father worked with Firestool for 24 years. I had to build his house. He worked for 24 unbroken years. The 25th year that he's supposed to retire, Firestool pensioned him. And just like that, he benefited nothing. So I appreciate what you said. And Julius, I love the way you posed the question. And we need to take these advices. If the government would just take these advices that you have given, I think Africa can be a destination of progress. Thank you so much.
Thanks. So currently, for your call, let's take this one on this line. Welcome. Let's hear you.
Yeah, good evening, Julia. And I want to say welcome to Liberia, Professor PLO Lumumba. Or Yahuwah, welcome to our sweet land of liberty. So in a country like Liberia, where people are living below the poverty line and life is so difficult to the extent that government has failed to provide job opportunity for its people, and the government that is being elected is calculating the people by taking breath from the mouth, Professor. So what do you think will be a kind of advice to the government in doing such thing?
When you say taking breath from the people's mouth, how?
That is to say that the government is now in the process of removing cyclists from the street. I mean, also getting
you mean taking the motorcyclists from the main roads?
Getting them from the main roads.
Oh, that's what I mean by taking breath from their mouth.
Yeah, that's taking breath from their mouth, and then also downsizing state securities in the name that they have not been able to go through the referral process, and so without taking up the necessary mechanism and putting the necessary mechanism into place. So what you think would be a kind of appeal to the government instead of causing chaos in this country?
Okay, thanks. So kindly, he will speak to that. Let's see who's on this line. Welcome. Let's hear you quickly.
Thank you very much, Julius Jeh. This is Abu Bakar.
Go ahead.
I'm calling from Monrovia. Let me say thank you to the very landed professor. Professor, you have always taught us about the activities, the way in which the may I say the powerful countries have treated Africa, the continent, as. But if you were to do what I saw, to choose between America, China, and maybe Russia, as we have seen the Burkina Faso, they are tilting towards that. What would be your advice looking at where will Africa stand to benefit more? Or is it that Africa benefits nothing from dealing with these powerhouses?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. So kindly, if they align with from whom can they benefit more? Who's here? Welcome. Hello.
Yeah, good evening. Julius Jeh, this is Lafayette Bena. I call you from my residence in Monrovia. I'm happy to be on your show today. It's important for some of us who have believed in the ideological concept of PLO Lumumba to be on a show where we will be able to give our opinion and some of the things that we want to learn from the professor, moving forward. He put across on the vision on the basis of African unity, and he did not stop that far. He came to Liberia politics, which brought him, Mr. Jeh. It's important for us to know that what is the foundation of PLO Lumumba is doing for some of us who are like-minded, who follow him, who believe that we can be his students. To take off from here, even if we can be in a place like Kenya, we'll be there so that.
What you say for he to what carry you? For he to want to carry you to Kenya to go do what?
Yeah.
No, that's what I mean.
No,
that's what I mean. There are many Liberians who are so good to the extent that believe in the professor, and I would think.
Yeah, so just be straight and clear with the question. Yeah, just be clear with the question. What are you talking about? Scholarship opportunities or what?
We don't want to last on the basis of scholarship opportunity. The professor in studio know that there are young people who believe in it.
Yeah, I understand that part. What do you want him to do? That's my issue. Just go to what you want him to do.
I want you, not only him. I even want you, Julius Jeh, to connect us, some of us, like I just call my name, so that we want a professor.
Okay. So you want to be like disciples? Yeah, that means so you want to be like a disciple. Go and be with him there. Okay. So let me come back to you. Yeah. So the man.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, you can respond.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me respond by what the gentleman is saying. There are quite a number of course, the foundation has a presence in almost 40 African countries, and I hear what he's saying.
Okay.
It is just for want of resources, but technology has also helped.
Okay.
But I agree with you that we should be doing a lot more. And one of the things that we are trying to do, hopefully before the end of this year, is to have clarity in our mentorship programs, clarity in the practical things that we want to do. And we want to share with you. If you have any bright ideas of how we can bring this to fruition, please feel free to get in touch. But I take your point. It is positive, is well intended, and I think that is the way to go.
Okay.
The second thing that I want to talk about is the gentleman who posed the question, which one to choose?
Yeah.
There is no question of choice. Remember, all countries, whether it's Russia, China, the United States of America, define their national interest.
Okay.
And when they engage with us, they do that which is in their national interest. It is our duty as African countries to define what is in our national interest. And that links up with what the gentleman has talked about Firestone. We've got to, Liberia as a country must now re-examine the kind of agreements that it entered into with Firestone many years ago. So that if there was a sharing ratio, that ratio should now be improved. And if there was a need for technological transfer, if there is a need for workers' welfare, and this is not only in Liberia, you go to countries where there is mining such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, Botswana, countries are now renegotiating the kind of contracts that they entered into because, as Zambia's Simon Kapwepwe once said, the so-called colonizer will one day come back to Africa as investors, but they will not be investors, they'll be rapists. How do you stop them? By ensuring that you are clear that if you are going to mine my uranium, 50% of that income must come back home, and within 5 years you must have a smelting plant. If you are going to mine my gold, you've got to ensure that we have the capacity. John Joseph Pombe Magufuli did that in Tanzania. I think Yoweri Kaguta Museveni is now talking about it in Uganda. And I believe that what should happen here in Liberia, in Mauritania,
we have a whole
Sierra
lot of
Leone,
gold in a place
in
called
gold, for example.
Cape Mount.
Yes, so that should happen. You should have smelting companies in this country. And if we don't have the technology, one of the conditions would be to ensure that there is transfer of technology. There is a lot of things to be done, and I can't agree more that what has been described as investment in Africa has impoverished Africa much more, because a lot more is taken outside of the continent. Look at lithium. Today we are talking about migrating from fossil fuel, and Africa is the home of lithium, the home of cobalt, but it's being taken out as ore. So we as a continent, and once again I revisit the Lagos Plan of Action in 1980. Under the Lagos Plan of Action, Africa recognized that there must be intra-African trade. And intra-African trade now stands at less than 20%. If you go to Europe, it is about over 60%. Go to America, it's over 65%. North America, that is, go to Asia, is about 60%. Go to Latin America, is 40%. And value addition. If you are mining iron ore and you still have to import things from outside, it means the jobs are being created elsewhere. It means more of your money is going out. If you are have liquid gas and it still has to be taken by Total Energies or Rubies or Exxon Mobil, or if you have oil and you still have to export crude and import the refined, and you lose all the byproducts, then you will talk about investment, but there is no investment. So our duty as countries, our duty as a continent, I would want to imagine, for example, that the administration in Liberia and in Sierra Leone, when you get into power, one of the things that you must do is to ask your Ministry of Trade, your Office of the Attorney General, your Ministry of Mines, I want to see all the contracts that are live, and I want to re-examine them to ensure that Liberia does not have the short hand of the stick. That is what we must do. It is going to cause pain. It is going to earn you enemies from outside, but it is what patriotism demands for the better of the country.
Let's just squeeze in a few more. Then we'll let you go. Yeah? Yeah, just few more. Yeah, the prof has to leave, folks. But let's just squeeze in a few. Just 3 calls. Just 3, then we wrap up with him. Welcome. Let's hear you quickly.
Hey, how you doing, Julius?
Yes, go ahead.
Let me say hi to the prof. This is Godwin Ware Jr., and I'm joining you from the car website. Well, I just want to ask I want to tell the professor thank you for coming to Liberia, and I also want to tell you thank you to you for bringing him to the studio. I just want to know, the prof once served as a head of the anti-corruption in his country. I just want him to drill or chew how that office was, how his service ended, and whether he was the prime in our office. I just want to know, Professor. Thank you so kindly.
Okay, and what we can learn from that as well. Sure. Welcome. Let's hear you. Former Representative Candidate Musa Sharif.
Thank you. I did not grab many of the discussion, but just to say to our, very erudite prof, that welcome to Liberia. We are proud of you, and proud of Africa. And then let me stop there and listen to the prof.
Okay, thanks so kindly. Let's squeeze in this final one. Welcome.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Brother Julius. Yeah, sorry for background. I don't.
Fine, go ahead. Let's hear you.
Okay, man?
Yes, okay, FM. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mohamed Mbalo. I'm calling from Kawa. Okay, I just want to appreciate you for at least bringing a prof in the studio for us to get a high level of education this afternoon. I'm somebody who just lived in Lumumba. I always follow him since social media on YouTube. I just want to appreciate you really.
Okay.
And thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so kindly. Quickly, let's hear you, media man Benjamin Myers.
Yeah, good evening, Julius, and good evening to Prof. Patrice Los Otiano Lumumba. My name is D. Benjamin Myers, and I'm glad to be on your show. I think the Prof laid out some very quintessential issues that must not be ignored. Because if we historicize the economic model that was developed as at the founding of the nation state, you realize we will usually extract our raw materials and export them to other countries without value addition. In the mid-60s, when we were at the height of our economic boom, we became so much of an economic sensation to the point that we were 6 million above Japan in terms of our national reserve. That provoked a team from Singapore to have visited the shores of Liberia to do a study on our economic model, and they borrowed that concept. Today, Singapore is a developed nation. We bought Firestone, gave them 99 years contracts. After more than 100 years of running this particular obsolete, backward economic model, Liberia remains an economic basket case. And I'm sure this happens to be the fate of many African countries today on the continent of Africa. So I just want the Prof to further elaborate on, he talked about it a little bit, but how can we get our leaders to implement the beautiful recommendations he's giving? Because we said this time without number that we need to add value to the products we are extracting from ourselves, and this is the only way we can have a sustainable investment in the country. But it seems as though all of our pieces of advice have landed on deaf ears. So we want to develop a methodology on how we can get this grounded in the minds of our leaders to realize that this is what should be done, not necessarily for the country or for the continent of Africa to self-leverage.
Thanks so kindly, Ben. And when he leaves, I think the guys who were supposed to come did not come. I think they themselves are enjoying the Prof. We will continue with the course when he leaves, but we have to let him go. So those were the final batch. Of course, we come back to him now.
I think the question that has just been posed with a sound historical rendition of what happened to Liberia in the 60s and the Singaporean. You know, this story of Singapore and Korea is common. In East Africa, we talk about Kenya having taught South Korea. We talk about Uganda or some other country having lent these countries. What did they do? Part of the African problem, as I see it, is that our politicians think from election to election. We think in circles of elections while those countries think intergenerationally. If you look at Lee Kuan Yew's book From Third World to First World, you see a leader that is not thinking just about the next election. When you look at Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia, he's thinking about the next generation. When you think about Sir Siwur Sagur Ramgulam in Mauritius, you see about the next generation. Our politicians must stop thinking in 5-year, 6-year election cycles and must know that what they are running are administrations which are divided into 5, 4, or 6 years. Once they do that, the looting and stealing instinct, which is the instinct that governs most of our politicians, will disappear, and they'll begin to engage in legacy projects which will define how the countries go. If they do that, we'll then have a grand agenda for the country. The grand agenda will even be 100 years, because what Liberia needs does not vary from every administration to every administration. It is constant. It is the modalities of implementing. If we all agree that in the next 20 years, Liberia needs to generate 5,000 megawatts of electricity, it should not matter who is in power. If we agree that Liberia needs to feed herself, if we agree that Liberia needs to industrialize, if we agree that we need to revamp the education system in Liberia, what is going to happen is the modalities of achieving, but the target remains one. But if we think that if I take over from a particular administration, if they were building a road, I stop building that road, I start my own road, then we'll always be beginning things, will grow in size, but will remain children forever, ever in diapers. That, I think, is what the countries that I've mentioned have talked about. Look at Singapore. Without any resources we call natural. Just using the human resource. Look at Dubai that I talked about, in the continent Mauritius. So I think it must be done, and I believe that Liberia is in a vantage position of doing that. And then, to answer the question that was asked, my experience in the fight against corruption for 11 months is that your typical African politician is not interested in the fight against corruption. What they are interested in is to create the impression that corruption is being fought. And you can see it. Look at many African countries. Look at the amount of money that politicians are quick to accumulate while they are in office for a very short time. If you bear your fangs and you say and you are committed to the fight against corruption, then your life in office will be very short. My life in office and my entire administration, the top echelon, was only 11 months. And if you look at my certificate of termination of office, it says by change of law. The law was changed at midnight to abolish my office.
Wow.
And as I speak now...
Why was that so? Were you getting on their heels?
Oh yeah, yes indeed. We had at that time, and we had seen the former President Kibaki, and indicated that we were in the process of investigating 8 of his cabinet ministers. And these are individuals who sit at cabinet, and remember at that time, as it is now, the duty of the Anti-Corruption Commission is simply to recommend for prosecution. And at that time, you recommend to the Attorney General, who also sits in cabinet. So they look at your files and they say, these little boys think that they can use the officers to harass us. We'll show them. And you then become the subject of defamation cases. You become the subject of threats. It is not easy. But yet there must be people in the society who are prepared to fight. Right now, if you go to a country like Malawi, you'll see the plight of the lady who is trying to fight corruption. If you go to South Africa, you saw the fate of McCarthy, who had to run away and went to the World Bank. Nuhuri Badu in Nigeria. So the fate of any individual or any group of individuals who are interested in the fight against corruption is, number one, you'll be targeted. You will also be maligned. Because if you think that, and they have the machinery to do that, and unfortunately, even the people in the society are quick to blame those who are fighting corruption. They say, oh, I remember at one time, we had recommended the arrest of one individual, and he hired a group of individuals who came singing to our office saying, he is a thief, but he is our thief. Why are we targeting our thief? You can imagine. So that the social acceptance of the corrupt in most African countries, either based on corruption itself or ethnicity, is one of the things that hampers the fight against corruption, because impunity is alive and well. I remember at one time in a country that I'll not mention, one of the individuals had been arrested and was jailed in a foreign country, and when he came back home, there were people who met him at the airport saying, this is our son, others steal in shillings, but he steals in dollars. That is Africa for you. So when you see people coming out and doing the kind of thing that some of us try to do, it is out of conviction. It is a crusade. It is a dangerous crusade.
But that means the highest echelon has to be in support.
Without doubt.
The person who was the president.
Oh, yeah. In the fight against corruption, it must be from the highest point. In fact, a good director of corruption must be on hotline with the president, who every 1 week must be able to ring him and tell him, I myself am above reproach, don't fear. When you follow the law and do the right thing, then the right thing will be done. That is not just the president. You must have a judiciary that is brave. You must have a director of public prosecution who is not compromised. If you don't have those ingredients, a presidency that is committed, a director of public prosecution that is committed, a judiciary that is committed, then you who are investigating in corruption, you are lonely and exposed.
His name is Professor Dr. PLO Lumumba. We will let him go. He's a busy man. He says he will be back in June. Maybe we can have a 2-hour conversation when you are back at that time.
Indeed.
Yes. Folks, we are so grateful to the Prof. And we say thanks so kindly to Madame Lovetta Bailey-Sendolo, who was able to make this happen. We are taking a break. I will be right back.